Everyone thought it was just a farewell party. Rachel stood beside her husband, smiling like nothing was wrong, while the woman he'd been sleeping with, his HR manager, toasted to his bright future. But behind that smile, Rachel held the truth. She had the texts, the hotel receipts, the emails Clara thought no one would ever see. And when Rachel stepped up to the mic, the crowd still believed it was a tribute. It was, just not the kind anyone expected. The lights inside the Westbrook corporate hall glowed soft and golden, casting a warm haze over the farewell banner, stretched across the polished glass wall. "Thank you, Daniel Clark. Wishing you a life of adventure." Below it, the crowd clinked glasses and laughed, their voices rising and falling like waves, celebrating a man they believed they knew. Daniel stood at the center of it all, beaming. His dark blue suit, just tailored last week, hugged his frame with effortless elegance. He had always been the kind of man who could wear confidence like a second skin, who knew exactly how to smile, nod, and grip a hand at just the right pressure. Next to him stood his wife, Rachel. She wasn't the loudest in the room. She didn't need to be. Her presence alone commanded attention, poised, polished, and composed in a simple cream dress that curved at the waist and fell neatly below the knees. Her hands clasped gently in front of her revealed no tension. Only her eyes betrayed a deeper story, sharp, observant, fixed more on the people around Daniel than on Daniel himself, especially on one woman, Clara Benton, the company's HR manager. Clara was radiant tonight, red dress, heels too high for comfort, lipstick one shade darker than appropriate for an office event. She laughed too loudly at Daniel's jokes. When she gave her speech, she gripped the microphone with trembling hands and spoke about Daniel's leadership, his wisdom, his boundless generosity, but never once looked at Rachel. Rachel noticed. She noticed everything. When the slideshow began, Clara was the first to gasp and cheer. Photos of Daniel's early years at the company appeared, him cutting a ribbon at a new department launch, shaking hands with executives, raising a beer with colleagues on a retreat. A younger Rachel appeared in one photo, on the arm of Daniel, both of them grinning, unaware of the years ahead. People clapped. Someone whistled. Daniel gave a mock bow. Clara wiped her eyes with a cocktail napkin. Rachel reached for a glass of champagne from a passing tray and took a slow sip. From the outside, she looked every bit the elegant spouse, smiling on cue, nodding politely, offering gentle thanks when colleagues approached with compliments about her husband. But beneath the surface, her heartbeat was steady, not from calmness, but from control. Tonight, of all nights, there was no room for emotion, only precision. Across the room, Daniel accepted a glass of whiskey and gave a toast to his team. "To the people who made every day better, and to the woman who's kept me grounded all these years." Rachel raised her glass along with the others, but she didn't smile. Not quite. Not like Clara, whose eyes flickered to Daniel's with something far more personal than admiration. The toast ended. The crowd dispersed into smaller conversations, laughing in corners, networking by the dessert table. A live jazz band played something soft in the background, forgettable, by design. Rachel moved toward the back of the room, blending effortlessly with the decor, watching everything. She had been preparing for this night for months. Every seating arrangement, every song selection, every slide in the farewell reel had gone through her hands. She'd made it perfect, on purpose, because a celebration this grand was the only stage worthy of what she planned to do next. "Mrs. Clark," someone greeted her warmly. A woman from finance, someone she barely knew. "You must be so proud." Rachel turned with a practiced smile. "I am." They chatted for a moment, Rachel nodding, thanking her, even complimenting her earrings. She could pretend with the best of them, but even as she spoke, her eyes drifted once more toward Daniel, toward Clara. They stood too close, not in a way most people would question, but in a way someone who once loved Daniel with her entire soul would never overlook. Rachel excused herself and made her way toward the AV booth at the back of the hall. No one paid her much attention, just the wife making sure the farewell video had played properly. The technician gave her a thumbs up. She smiled, leaned down, and whispered something he couldn't quite hear over the music. He nodded and she handed him a slim silver USB. "This is for the final tribute," she said. Then she turned back toward the party. A fresh drink in her hand, Rachel returned to Daniel's side just as he wrapped up a conversation with one of the executives. He looked at her with a mix of affection and performance, like a man posing for a photograph he'd rather not take. "You okay?" he asked, brushing a hand over her shoulder. "Of course," Rachel said smoothly. "Everything's going exactly as planned." And it was, because beneath the laughter, the handshakes, the staged affection, Rachel was holding a secret as sharp as a blade, and the moment to unsheath it was getting closer. 3 months earlier, the world had still felt mostly normal. Rachel remembered the day clearly. A Wednesday, cloudy, unremarkable. She had just come home from work, balancing a paper bag of groceries on her hip, humming a tune she couldn't name. Daniel's jacket was draped over the back of the chair. Odd, since he usually hung it in the closet. She reached to move it and felt something crinkle in the pocket. A receipt. Nothing unusual on its own, except it was from Le Jardin, a restaurant she'd always wanted to try but Daniel claimed was too pretentious. The date on the receipt matched a night he told her he was working late on budget revisions. She smiled at first, assuming maybe he was planning a surprise. But Rachel was a woman built on instinct, and this didn't sit right. The receipt listed 2 entrees, a bottle of wine, and a dessert meant for sharing. She didn't say anything that night. Daniel came home past 9, loosening his tie, peppering her with an apologetic smile. "We ran late. You know how Q4 is." She kissed his cheek, said nothing. But she took the receipt, folded it neatly, and tucked it into the back of her nightstand. The next week, she noticed Daniel had started using a different cologne. Earthier, musky. She complimented it once, casually. "Oh," he replied, glancing away. "Sample I picked up from a client meeting. Figured I'd try it." The lies didn't come in bursts. They arrived like fine cracks in glass. Slow, delicate, almost invisible at first. But they were there. A name started coming up more often. Clara. She was helping coordinate some internal restructuring, working closely on the HR budget. A powerhouse, really. Rachel hadn't paid Clara much attention before. They'd exchanged pleasantries at past company functions. Clara always with perfect posture and a slightly forced smile. She struck Rachel as the kind of woman who measured approval in how many people looked at her twice when she entered a room. Rachel's friend Alyssa noticed first. Over coffee one weekend, Rachel mentioned the receipt and the cologne in passing. Alyssa raised an eyebrow. "And you don't think something's going on?" Rachel shook her head. "It could be nothing, or it could be exactly what it looks like." Rachel didn't sleep much that night. 2 days later, curiosity pushed her toward Clara's social media. Her Instagram was mostly corporate photos, panels, events, motivational quotes. But one picture stood out. A glass of red wine across from a plate of seared duck. The caption, "When the company dinner turns into laughter after midnight." Posted the same night as the receipt. Rachel stared at the image for a long time. There was no tag, no visible face across the table. But the wine glass matched the one on the receipt. The timing was exact. Her stomach twisted. She started watching Daniel more closely. The late nights became more frequent. The excuses vaguer. One night she woke up at 2:30 a.m. and found Daniel on the back porch whispering into his phone. When he noticed her, he hung up quickly and muttered something about checking on a team member in another time zone. She nodded, then quietly downloaded a monitoring app Alyssa had once told her about. From that point on, every message Daniel sent or received was mirrored to her laptop. Texts, emails, even photos. It was invasive, and it broke her heart. But it was the only way to know for sure. The first week, nothing alarming. Daniel complained about project deadlines, sent innocuous memes to coworkers, confirmed plans for his farewell party. But then late one night, a message popped up from a contact labeled only C. "Booked us that suite at the Marquette again. Can't wait to have you all to myself. No small talk, no pretending." Rachel blinked. Her hands trembled slightly as she clicked into the message chain. "Clara, we're getting so close to being done with the charade." Daniel, "She's buying it. I've already told her I want our last big trip to be Tuscany. I'll book Paris for us instead." Rachel stared at the screen. The man she had shared a home, a bed, and nearly 20 years of memories with had been planning a separate life with someone else. And worse, he thought she was too blind to see it. She didn't cry. Not then. She closed the laptop gently, walked to the kitchen, and poured herself a glass of water. And then she sat at the table in silence until the sun rose, watching the light creep across the floor like a quiet reminder. There would be no returning to normal. By morning, she had made up her mind. She would not scream. She would not beg. She would not give him the satisfaction of a breakdown. She would outmaneuver him, and she knew just the person to help her do it. He wanted a fresh start. She'd give him one, just not the kind he'd begged Clara for. Rachel had never hired a private investigator before. She thought about that as she sat across from Elliot Graves, a quiet man in his late 40s with crow's feet etched deep into the corners of his eyes. His office wasn't the trench coat and fedora kind you'd expect from a movie. No shadowy blinds or smoke curling under the door. Just a glass building suite in a strip of offices, clean and silent. Everything about him said discreet, unremarkable, and reliable. Exactly what she needed. Elliot listened patiently as Rachel laid out the situation, her voice steady, her sentences practiced. She told him about the text messages, the suspicious receipt, the C in Daniel's contact list, the planned Tuscany trip that was really a Parisian escape. She did not cry. When she was finished, Elliot leaned back, tapped his pen once against the desk and said, "You're not crazy, and yes, I'll take the case." Rachel nodded once. That was all she needed. The next few weeks passed in a surreal rhythm. By day, she played the role of a supportive wife preparing for her husband's big transition. She helped plan his farewell celebration, offered to help with speeches, organized RSVPs, even arranged for the company's AV technician to sync the farewell video. Everyone praised her devotion. By night, she met with Elliot. He delivered reports like clockwork, photographs of Daniel and Clara at hotels, timestamps of their meetings, expense reports Clara approved for training dinners with just two attendees, herself and Daniel. One image in particular made Rachel's breath catch. It was Daniel and Clara standing close outside the Marquette Hotel. Daniel was brushing hair from Clara's face, something he hadn't done to Rachel in years. Discreet, but intimate, Elliot had commented. The body language says a lot. Rachel stared at the print for a long time after Elliot left, but she didn't confront Daniel. She still cooked his meals, still laughed at the appropriate moments, still let him kiss her forehead in the morning before he left. She had learned painfully that betrayal does not come in explosions, but in leaks. It was better to wait until the dam broke on its own. And when it did, she wanted an audience. As her plan formed, Rachel began collecting the pieces. Elliot provided a compiled folder with photos, financial evidence, text messages, and even two audio clips. One recorded just outside Clara's office where Daniel whispered, "Soon, baby, just hold on, we're almost out." Rachel uploaded everything onto a USB drive. Then she made a duplicate, and another. The control gave her power. She even spoke briefly to a lawyer, just to prepare for the legal storm that might follow. The lawyer advised her to be cautious but confirm the affair, if proven in public and tied to misused company funds, could spell serious consequences for Clara's career. And if Rachel could tie some of those expenses back to their shared finances, it would bolster her position in a divorce settlement. It wasn't just about humiliation anymore. It was about justice. Daniel, meanwhile, remained blissfully unaware. He talked about their last adventure to Italy, told her to expect a big surprise once the party was over. He wanted to toast to a new chapter, without her in it, of course, but Rachel didn't flinch. Instead, she began adding subtle touches to the party plans. She had told the company AV Tech she wanted a personal moment to close the evening. A private thank you video Daniel wouldn't be expecting. He was thrilled at the idea. "That's going to make the room melt," he'd said. Rachel smiled. On the night before the farewell, Elliot handed her a final envelope. "I found something you might want to lead with," he said. Inside was a printed email. Clara to Daniel. Subject, redacted for your eyes only. "Once she sees the Tuscany tickets, you'll be free. I'm tired of being your secret, Danny. I want my life to start already. HR's reviewing your exit package. I signed off on the bonus. They have no idea. No one ever will. I love you." Rachel folded the letter once and placed it into her purse. That night, she went home and kissed Daniel goodnight for the last time. She lay in bed beside him, awake long after he fell asleep. His breathing deepened, and he rolled toward her, hand resting lightly on her hip. For a moment the temptation rose, just to shake him, to ask, why? To cry, yell, do something. But she didn't, because Rachel knew what he didn't. She would never again waste pain on a man who used her love as camouflage. Instead, she visualized it, how he would look standing on that stage, how Clara would blink, confused, how the video would play, clip after clip, truth after truth, and how Rachel would stand still, finally not the one in the shadows. She didn't need a fight, she needed a stage. Back in the warm gold-lit hall, the farewell party was in full swing. Laughter rang across the open space, layered over the soft clinking of glasses and the low hum of jazz. Dessert trays were being passed around. The air was thick with nostalgia, half-faked goodbyes, and the celebratory energy only corporate rituals could conjure. Equal parts flattery and performance. Daniel stood beneath the hanging chandelier, shaking hands, posing for photos, leaning in close with co-workers who wouldn't remember his exit in 2 weeks. He looked happy, relaxed. Clara was glowing, her smile a little too wide, her cheeks flushed from the wine, her arm brushing against Daniel's a little too often. To anyone not paying attention, it might have seemed innocent. But Rachel had learned how to watch, how to observe the gestures most people never even notice. She was standing near the back, sipping water instead of champagne, her cream dress now lit faintly by the projection glow from the AV table. Everything she needed was in place. It was time. One of the senior VPs clinked his glass and called for attention. "Folks, can we gather for just a moment? Let's give our friend Daniel a proper send-off." Applause followed as Daniel stepped forward, feigning modesty with a wave of his hand and a chuckle that sounded too rehearsed. Rachel watched as he took the microphone. "Wow," Daniel began, laughing. "It's hard to believe it's already here. My last week. I never thought I'd walk away from this job, but I've always believed in making space for new chapters and trusting the people who matter most." Clara nodded almost imperceptibly from the crowd. That look again, like they shared something too sacred for words. Daniel continued, thanking his mentors, team members, HR, especially HR. He even gave a special nod to Clara for keeping me sane through the years. Rachel tilted her head slightly, allowing herself a single breath of satisfaction. Go ahead, she thought. Make it sweet. You'll choke on it soon enough. As the crowd clapped and the VP stepped up to offer closing words, he turned unexpectedly toward Rachel. "And before we wrap this up," he said, smiling, "we thought it'd be fitting to invite someone who's walked every mile of this journey alongside Daniel. Rachel, would you like to say a few words?" A few curious murmurs rustled through the group. Rachel smiled softly, stepping forward with calm, measured grace. "Of course," she said, accepting the mic. Her voice when she began was soft but firm, precise like the edge of a knife wrapped in velvet. "Thank you all," she began, eyes sweeping across the crowd. "It means so much to see so many of you gathered to celebrate Daniel. He's poured a lot into this company over the years, and I know this farewell has meant a lot to him, to both of us." Daniel beamed beside her, his hand hovered behind her back as if for support, but she didn't move to meet it. "And I'd also like to thank someone else tonight," she added, pausing briefly. "Clara Benton." Heads turned. Clara froze mid-sip, caught off guard by the sound of her name. "You've done so much for Daniel's career," Rachel continued, looking directly at Clara. "Hours of late-night planning, private meetings, business dinners, emotional support." Her tone never broke. Calm, gracious, almost reverent. The crowd chuckled nervously. Clara's smile was tight now, like something was pulling at its corners. "So," Rachel said, turning slightly toward the AV booth, "I thought it would be lovely to include one final tribute, one Daniel hasn't seen yet." Daniel's brow creased. "Wait, what?" But it was too late. The screen behind them flickered once. Then came the opening image. Daniel outside a hotel, brushing Clara's hair from her face. The room fell silent. A second clip played. Daniel's voice on a grainy audio. "Just hold on, we're almost out." A collective intake of breath followed. "Is that?" Someone dropped a glass. The slideshow continued. Email screenshots. Text from Clara to Daniel. Love notes disguised as business talk. A final message with Clara's HR signature authorizing a strategic accommodation stipend for a retreat where only 2 people ever checked in. Daniel lunged toward the screen. Turn that off! Uh, the technician looked helpless. Rachel had already ensured it was wirelessly mirrored and secured. The feed couldn't be stopped without cutting the power. The final frame lingered, Daniel kissing Clara in the elevator. Time-stamped 11:43 p.m., 2 weeks after he had told Rachel he was working late on expense audits. Rachel turned back to the crowd. Her expression was unreadable. I suppose we all wear different faces, she said calmly. Some of us wear them to lead, others wear them to hide. She handed the mic back to the VP, who looked like he had aged 5 years in 30 seconds. I'll be stepping outside, she said, adjusting her clutch. But please, enjoy the rest of the evening. She walked past Clara, who stood frozen, her lipstick slightly smudged, her wine untouched. She walked past Daniel, who looked at her like a man watching his house burn down. And she walked past the crowd, silent, stunned, staring. She didn't flinch. She didn't smile. She had no reason to. And just like that, Daniel's farewell party turned into Clara's termination meeting. It wasn't the video that caused the real damage. It was the silence. The soundless, stunned hush of 100 coworkers, friends, and corporate leaders watching a trusted employee's double life dissolve under fluorescent lights and looping footage. The projector screen loomed behind Daniel like a judgmental eye. His image, smiling beside Clara, his hands slipping into hers as they exited a hotel lobby, froze mid-frame. The timestamp glared at the crowd in a blood-red font. 11:43 p.m., company business retreat. Only 2 names on the reservation. Neither one was Rachel. Daniel stood frozen, blinking. His mouth opened, but no sound came out. The room, just minutes ago filled with laughter and applause, now echoed only with the distant hum of the projector fan. Clara moved first. She stepped backward, slowly, cautiously, her heel catching slightly on the edge of a tablecloth. The movement sent a small dessert plate crashing to the floor. Still, no one moved to help her. What is this? She whispered, her voice too thin to carry. What is this? But Rachel was already gone. Somewhere beyond the stunned crowd, she had slipped away as quietly as she'd planned. She hadn't needed to stay. That was never the point. She didn't want the apology or the explanation. She just wanted them to know she knew and to feel it in front of everyone. The crowd began to murmur. A man from accounting leaned toward a coworker. Is that real? I think so, the other whispered. Did you see the email signatures? HR logs? That's her name. She approved those expenses herself. Clara spun toward Daniel, panic flooding her face now. Danny, say something. Tell them it's not. Tell them we didn't. Daniel swallowed, then hissed under his breath. What did you tell her? What did you send her? I didn't send her anything, Clara snapped. I was careful. You weren't careful, he barked. You used your work email. You booked the rooms in your name. Their voices rose, hushed but sharp enough to slice through the stunned quiet. The VP of Operations stepped forward, clearing his throat awkwardly. Daniel, Clara, I think maybe we should move this somewhere private. But the crowd wasn't moving. They weren't looking away either. Phones were already in hands, not recording, but messaging. Live. Someone from legal glanced at another manager. If that's real and she's HR, she's in serious violation. That's a complete conflict of interest, another finished. It could compromise every exit package he signed. Daniel finally moved toward the mic, face pale and glistening. He raised a hand, trembling slightly. I don't know what that was, he said, trying to laugh. Some kind of joke, maybe. A prank. Or someone trying to make a scene. But no one laughed with him. Clara was visibly shaking now. We have to fix this, she whispered. We'll go to HR. No, I am HR. Oh my God. That was the moment it really hit her. She was HR. She had used her company credentials to sign off on Daniel's retreats. She had authorized bonuses with barely their justifications. She had tried to cover her tracks, but the paper trail had been preserved by Rachel. Screen captures, financial logs, expense approvals, personal messages, all perfectly timed and legally devastating. And she had done it all while holding a position that demanded impartiality, confidentiality, and ethical responsibility. This wasn't just a scandal, it was grounds for immediate dismissal. Daniel looked around helplessly, searching for someone, anyone to defend him. But the crowd had already made their decision, not with words but with distance. His inner circle had shrunk to zero in less than 10 minutes. A voice finally broke the stillness. The head of HR, Clara's direct superior, stepped forward with a clipboard in hand. "Clara," he said. His voice was dry, formal. "We'll need to speak first thing Monday morning. Expect a compliance audit. In the meantime, I'd suggest logging off the internal system immediately." Clara's face drained of color. She opened her mouth, but no words came. Daniel turned toward the door, his hands twitching at his sides. "I need a minute," he muttered. "You'll need more than a minute," someone called from the back. Laughter, this time not kind. Daniel staggered through the crowd like a man walking through smoke, people stepping back as if his shame might cling to them like static. Clara followed, nearly tripping in her heels, her expression hollow. Behind them, the screen still glowed with the final frame, a list of travel charges approved by Clara for team development, with a note that said no receipt needed, cleared by HR. It was the last image many of them would remember from the party. Not the speeches, not the cake, just that cold, undeniable evidence, in the echo of Rachel's calm voice. "Some of us wear masks to lead, others wear them to hide." The masks were gone now, and all that remained was the fallout. Monday morning at the Clark residence was quiet, too quiet. The house had the strange stillness of an abandoned stage after the play is ended. A forgotten wine glass still sat on the kitchen counter. A suit jacket, crumpled from the night before, lay half on the back of the couch. Daniel had come home late, silent and seething, but Rachel hadn't waited up. She was already gone. In fact, she'd been up at dawn, at her lawyer's office, seated in a sleek, glass-walled conference room, reviewing papers with sharp-eyed precision. No hesitation, no second thoughts, just a calm, methodical dismantling of the life she had once shared with Daniel. He had given her the gift of clarity, and now she would return it, with documents. The attorney, Marla Chen, was direct and methodical. "With the evidence you provided, texts, financial records, recorded statements, we can easily argue marital misconduct and misuse of joint assets. You'll walk away with more than just the house." Rachel didn't smile, but she nodded. "Good. And his reputation?" Marla asked, flipping through a file. "That may not recover, not with what you exposed." "That was never my goal," Rachel said. "But I'm not sorry either." Across town, the fallout was still unraveling. Clara didn't show up to work that morning. She didn't log in. She didn't answer calls. By noon, an internal investigation had already begun. The evidence Rachel had unveiled, clean, time-stamped, legally sourced, was now under review by compliance. Clara's corporate card had been frozen, her credentials revoked. Whispers swirled through the office corridors. Some people tried to rationalize it. "We never really saw them together." Others were harsher. "She always thought she was above the rules." As for Daniel, he didn't leave the house that day, or the day after. His early retirement had turned into a quiet disgrace. Emails from former co-workers had gone unanswered. The same people who had laughed beside him 2 nights ago now left his name out of conversations altogether. He finally tried calling Rachel late Tuesday night. She declined the call, then blocked his number. Rachel had no interest in hearing his excuses. She knew what he'd say. It didn't mean anything. It just happened. "I was lost. I didn't know how to end it." Maybe he'd even cry. But she wasn't here to play the role of his audience anymore. She was busy writing a new story, one where she was the protagonist. On Wednesday, she listed the Tuscany vacation package he'd booked on a travel resale site. It sold within 4 hours. With the money, she booked her own getaway, Greece, a place she'd always dreamed of visiting, but Daniel claimed was too crowded, too expensive, too overdone. It sounded perfect. She arrived in Santorini 2 weeks later, standing on the edge of a cliffside balcony overlooking the Aegean Sea. The wind tangled her hair, the salt brushing across her lips. She hadn't smiled this freely in years. No one knew her here. No one asked about Daniel. No one knew that just weeks ago she had stood in a room full of strangers and exposed the man she once loved for exactly who he was. And that was the beauty of it. She didn't need anyone's validation. She had already taken back what was hers. That night she sipped chilled white wine and watched the sunset. Her phone buzzed once. An email notification from Marla. Subject: Final divorce settlement review. Daniel has agreed to full financial terms. No contest. Transfer pending. Rachel read it, then closed her phone. No reply necessary. In a small boutique the next morning, she spotted a necklace, a simple gold chain with a single charm shaped like a lock. The shop owner smiled. "It's symbolic," she explained. "It means you've learned to protect yourself." Rachel bought it without hesitation. She no longer felt broken. She felt awake, awake to the truth, awake to herself. Back home, Daniel's name was quietly removed from the company's internal awards page. His farewell gift, a custom plaque signed by the executive team, was found in a box near his trash can. Clara moved out of the city a month later. Rumors suggested she took a job in another state under a different last name. But her LinkedIn went dark. No one heard from her again. Rachel never spoke of them again. She didn't need to. Some justice is loud, public. But the best kind? The kind that speaks for itself. Rachel didn't rebuild her life with vengeance. She rebuilt it with truth, and a view that no longer included anyone who made her feel small.